morning, good afternoon, good evening, no matter where you are in the world. This is JJ on JJ's PC Builds. Okay, today we're going to do something a little different. I had a message put in my on a video about about the flashing and stuff like that. This is what it comes down to. It's motherboard and processor compatibility. We're going to talk a little bit about that. So we're going to go ahead and dive right in really quick and let you know about motherboard compatibility. Okay, now the Ryzen 5 5600G, okay, that is on the Ryzen Zen 3 5000 series. Okay, that is not compatible with the A320 motherboards because you have to have a BIOS update in order for that to work correctly on that motherboard, which I don't think Gigabyte put one out. If they did, I do apologize, but the thing is this, from what I know, is that the 5000 series will not work with an A320 motherboard. Now, they did put out the update. Asus put out an update for the B450MA II motherboard, the MA second edition. They did put out a BIOS update, which I'm using that right now. I'm using it right now on this motherboard that I'm streaming to you live, and recording and everything else. And that's with the Ryzen 5 5600G. But that's on the B450 motherboard. That's not on a A320A. The A320 by Gigabyte or whatever manufacturer, because I don't think that they put out the right BIOS update for that. Now, if you're running the Ryzen 3 3600G in that motherboard, that's going to work. That's going to work for that series, for that motherboard itself. But putting the Ryzen 5 5600G in there, it's not going to work correctly. And that explains that all your flashing problems and everything else. So no matter what you're going to do, even if you update your preferences and Second Life or whatever you're playing on, they're not going to work correctly. Because you don't have enough BIOS support. You don't have enough support in your BIOS to support the chip itself. So you're going to need to upgrade your motherboard. Either if you want to do the B450, now you have to update the BIOS before the chip will start working in there. But if you do have the Ryzen 3 3600, the 3200G, you can plug it into the B450 and you can update the BIOS that way. Update the BIOS software to support the Ryzen 5 5600G. Or you can do BIOS flashback, either way. I'm sure there's many videos out there for that. And that way you can use the Ryzen 5 5600G in a B450 motherboard, not A320, B450. Now the 300 series I would get away from. If you're going to use the Ryzen 3 3200G, use that with the A320. Now, if you want to use it for the B450, you could use it for the B450 as well. I mean, the Ryzen 3 3200G will work in the B450 motherboard. But once you do the BIOS update, then after that, if you do the BIOS update for the Ryzen 5 5600G, then it'll work for the 5600G, but it'll stop working for the Ryzen 3 3200G. Okay, now You can take that 3200G and put it back in the A320 motherboard and use that as like a secondary computer. If you ever have problems with the newer computer, you always got a backup computer, just a first say. But the thing is, to get that Ryzen 5 5600G to work in that A320 motherboard, you're actually going to stress out the processor. You're going to stress out the motherboard because it's kind of different BIOS design. So don't expect it to work like you want it to. Okay? This I did my research. Okay, I did my research on this to find out if it would work on a motherboard like that. If I'm going to pay $80 for a motherboard like that, I might as well go up a few bucks and get, a better motherboard. Like the B450 or the 5, you can find it on Amazon. Look, I'm going to switch over to this real quick. I'm going to take that out right there. I'm going to switch over to my action screen and show you right here. Let me go ahead and just size this in a little bit better for you. Let's see. Let's get this into screen a little bit. Try to slide this in a little bit. Okay. Well, here we go. I'll slide it into the screen. This one, now they took and they raised the price. It is $94, but it was, you might be able to find it for $79 somewhere else, but I can tell you, this is the motherboard I got. This supports, right here, it says right here, the Ryzen 5000 3rd, 2nd, and 1st gen, right here, Ryzen ATX motherboard, 128 gigabyte DDR4, 4400 OC. That's the max overclock that you can use with this motherboard. Okay, and it supports HDMI 2.0B, DVI, and D subs, USB 3.2, Gen 2, BIOS flashback, and Aurora Sync 9462. Okay, if you want to get like $100 motherboard, you can get $100 motherboard. But I suggest you not use the 320. Okay, the 320, the 300 series, you're not going to be able to use that processor with because it's not supported. Okay, now it might look like it's supported, but it's not supported. Okay. Now you can go the 500 series. If you really want to look it up, you go B550. We'll just go through this really quick. And, just type the M and the A and see what comes up. Okay, now if you want to go the B550 with Wi-Fi 2, it's $139. If you want to do it without the Wi-Fi and you want to do a commercial motherboard, which these are pretty good motherboards right here too. So this has got 4.0, this has got 4K at 60 Hertz, TPM, ASUS Control Center, and all that, $119. Now, if you want to do the AC version, they got it right here for $129. They got the B550 Plus for $139. They got the ASUS Tough for $159. Depends on what you want to spend. Okay, now, but that's totally up to you. This is just give you a look, because looking at this. And I want you to look at this. Okay, now this goes up to 4 gigahertz. This is right here. This is the Ryzen 3 3200G, which is supported by the A320. Okay, now the thing is this is the Ryzen 5 5600G, which is a Cyan processor. okay, which is Ryzen 5 Zen 3 Cyan, which chipset it's supported by the 3, the 4, and the 5, but they don't tell you that with the 300 series it's not all supported. Okay, it's not recommended to use it for the 300 series. Okay, that's why they got an asterisk right there, because it's not fully supported. Okay, now 400 series and 500 series, it's fully supported. Okay, but as far as the 300 series motherboards, it's not fully supported as of yet. I haven't seen any support out there whatsoever shown for the 300 the 300 series motherboards. Now the 400 series, I can vouch for it because I got it in my computer right now. The 400 series, I can vouch for it works. 500 series, it should have no problem. It should work. But when it comes to this processor, it's a very finicky processor. If you want to use integrated graphics, it's best to use it on the B450 or greater motherboard. I would not use it on a 300 series. Use your 3200G on your 300 series. But as far as the Ryzen 5 5600G, it's best to use it on the 400 series or greater, from the 400 to the 500 series. 300 series, it's not supported. So I don't even know why they even think about putting that there, because the manufacturers ain't going to make it well supported, and then you're running into these problems of red flashing and all that. The processor's not really supported on the 300 series. So you're going to have a bunch of problems. So my recommendation to you, and I'm making this video just for you, my recommendation to you is to get a 400 series motherboard or greater. Take and put the 300 series off to the side, spend like 79 to 100, 110, 120 bucks, and if you don't want to use a discrete graphics card, then it's best supported, if you're using an iGPU, to make the small investment. Since you already made the investment in the processor, you might as well make the investment in the motherboard and upgrade the motherboard as well. So that's my take on that. As far as you trying to run this processor on an older style motherboard, which the 300 series is an older style motherboard, you're best off to run it on a 400 series or greater motherboard. 300 series isn't really supported, and I don't know why they don't support it. It's not me, it's the companies. Even if Gigabyte says, hey, it's supported by the 300 series, 320, A320 is supported. But, they don't tell you that, especially if you buy from Newegg. They don't tell you if it's supported or not. But from what it's saying here on Newegg, that the support is Ryzen first and second generation, and it doesn't have third generation support on that motherboard you have. So, oops, sorry, I had something in my eye. It doesn't have third generation support on that motherboard. So, I mean, you might be able to get away with running that 3200G on there, but as far as the Ryzen 5 5600G, you're not going to be able to get away with it. You're gonna have all these mishaps. You're best off to not put any more stress on that processor. Get yourself a new motherboard, update it. You can still probably use the same RAM that you got from that motherboard to the new motherboard, because It's going to be DDR4, so they're both DDR4 supported. You'll have more options on rebar and stuff like that. You're best off just update it to either go the 450 or the 550. If you want to use that processor, it's best off to update to the better of the bunch when it comes to motherboards. So update your motherboard, and then after that, slowly go through the settings of your BIOS, set it up to where it's in a happy spot with the RAM and the processor, and everything's in a nice and a happy spot after you get done updating everything. And after that, it'll run like a gem. I don't have any of the flashing on the screen or anything that you're exhibiting. If I did, then that would be a different story. I've never had that happen with this processor. Now, for it to happen with you, that's more or less saying it's the motherboard's the issue. So you've already narrowed it down to the motherboard, but you're best to put it on a better motherboard, either the B450 or the B550. And I wouldn't stick too much with Gigabyte. I would try to go with Asus, or I'm sticking with Asus because I'm happy with it and it's running fine. I'm not having no issues. I'm just going to recommend Asus. So depends on the motherboard. You got to watch if it's an overclocking motherboard or if it's just a locked motherboard. See, but you got the Ryzen 5 5600G, which is an unlocking chip. So it's an unlocked chip. You're best to have an unlocked motherboard. So best off to go with either the B450, which I just showed you on the screen, or go with the B550 that's unlocked. It's fully unlocked. Best to stay with Asus. You won't have any problems with that. But as far as setting it up, it's pretty much squeaky clean. I run everything on auto, and it runs like a gem. So I don't have any trouble that way. So there you go. 3200 megahertz on the RAM. Infinity clock, 1600 megahertz, no problems. So, but anyway, if this is your first time here, make sure you like and subscribe. Subscribe to the channel. We're still trying to get to 1,000 subscribers, and we're trying to get to 4,000 watch hours. 4,000 watch hours is a lot of hours, but if you got 4,000 people watching 1 hour, there's the 4,000 hours. So let's hope we can get to 4,000 subscribers, or we can get to 100,000 subscribers, or a billion subscribers, which would be nice. And then we'd have all the watch hours we need. So it only takes like 10, what is it? For 1 billion, say about maybe 1 minute per subscriber. But anyway, I hope this video helped you out. But we're going to jump out of here for now. Change your motherboard, and hope that the A320 didn't damage anything on the Ryzen 5 5600G, because if the settings are pushed wrong, it could do some internal damage onto the processor. Let's just hope it didn't do any internal damage to the processor. If it did, then you might want to think of sending it back and getting another one. Just to recommend that. But anyway, we're going to jump out of here. You all have a safe day, and we will see you on the next video.